Hello everyone. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you're new. My name is Kristen. This is my booktube, and we are currently in a sprint to the finish to get as many books in as we can in the last few days of 2023. And so, what better time to finish my Hunger Games reading vlog series than at the end of the year? So that's what we're going to be doing tonight. Tonight we're going to be finishing reading Mockingjay, then we're going to watch the movie, and we are going to be done with the Hunger Games rewatch reread. Yeah, so that is the plan for the last upload of 2023. So we will start tonight by knocking out yet another book and finishing Mockingjay. And then, like we did with Catching Fire and Mockingjay Part 1, I will take notes of all of the thoughts that I have, and then we will regroup in the morning to discuss them. Hopefully there won't be as many for Mockingjay Part 2 because I've at least seen this movie. So I am aware of some of the things that happen in this movie. I just don't remember how close they are to the book. So hopefully this video will not be over an hour long this time. I'm going to try my best to keep it a little bit on the shorter side. It's not going to be short, I'm sure, by any means. But we're going to try our best to not make it ridiculously long. I have some cleaning that I need to do first, so I'm going to start out by just listening to part of Mockingjay while I do some cleaning in my kitchen, picking up in my living room, that kind of thing. This little step stool right here needs to be put away. It's stuff like that. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on that, start with listening to the book, and then once I feel like I'm in a good place with the cleanliness of my apartment, then I will sit down and physically read for the last chunk of the book. According to Audible, we have about 3.5 hours left of the book. So let's just go ahead and get started with it because that puts us at about 8 o'clock finishing the book. And I'm sure this movie is over 2 hours. So we're gonna need to get snappy with it and get started. But yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the reading vlog. Okay, I haven't really had much to say thus far. I am on page 320 right now of about 388, I think. So we only have about like 60 pages left, and it's going well. I just haven't really had many thoughts because it's just been like action-packed the whole time, you know? They're on this mission to get into the Capitol, and yeah, so people have been dying. Boggs has died, Finnick has died, Castor has died, and I'm at the part now where they have made it to Tigress's shop. And in case there are people out there that do not know, Tigress in Mockingjay, who owns the fur undergarments shop in the Capitol and basically has a secret passageway that the rebels escape through when they're stuck in the Capitol and Snow is hunting them, she is the same Tigress in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. That is Coriolanus Snow's older cousin that basically raised him and who had so much faith in him before the 10th Hunger Games. And Katniss is talking about how obviously she's changed a lot look-wise since the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. She's had a ton of work done. She's had tiger stripes tattooed on her face, had her nose surgically flattened so she looks more feline-like, has the longest whiskers Katniss has ever seen on her face, all of that kind of stuff to make her look more feline. And it's funny because Katniss actually poses the question, did her parents name her Tigress and the, quote, self-mutilation is a result of matching that name? Or did she start the tiger transformation and then change her name to match? So that's a funny tidbit because I was reading that and I was like, oh yeah, no, I know the answer to that. Tigress is her actual name. But another interesting part in this is when Katniss questions why Tigress wants to help them. So I'm going to read a little excerpt for you. And this is the part where Tigress hasn't said a word yet. They've just basically asked for her help and she like makes some cat noises and like crawls off of her little chair that she's sitting in and just pops open part of her wall. And there's just a steep stone staircase and she just gestures for them to go in. So that's where we're at right now. And then the book says, everything about the situation screams trap. I have a moment of panic and find myself turning to Tigress, searching in those tawny eyes. Why is she doing this? She's no Cinna, someone willing to sacrifice herself for others. This woman is the embodiment of capital shallowness. She was one of the stars of the Hunger Games until she wasn't. So is that it then? Bitterness? Hatred? Revenge? Actually, I'm comforted by the idea. A need for revenge can burn long and hot, especially if every glance in a mirror reinforces it. Did Snow ban you from the games? I ask. She just stares back at me. Somewhere, her tiger tail flicks with displeasure. Because I'm going to kill him, you know. Her mouth spreads into what I take for a smile. Reassured that this isn't complete madness, I crawl through the space. And that is just such a cool moment in this book, because now that the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is out, you know why she is so happy to hear that Katniss is going to finally kill Coriolanus. She was always the person in his life that believed that he was good at his core. She tried so hard to keep him on the right path, to make sure that she did everything possible to make him turn out as a good person. And despite all of her efforts, she has to watch him slowly turn evil throughout the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, to where at the end of the book, you can really tell that Tigress is having a hard time seeing Coriolanus as a good person anymore, because she knows that he is lying and hiding things and that he is doing sketchy stuff to get what he wants. And at least I believe that she is seeing him turn into his father. And that scares her, because his father was a bad person. And despite her best efforts, Corio's turning out the same way. And from what I've read online, I do believe that Coriolanus is the reason why she stopped being in the Hunger Games. She was one of the stylists for the Hunger Games for a long time. Katniss says that she is one of the icons of the Hunger Games. And at this point in Panem's history, she has a shop that Katniss says looks like it's not even open. So it would seem like Coriolanus did everything in his power to at first build Tigress up and give her all of these opportunities. And then something had to have happened somewhere, because he then took all of that away and more, to where she's now not only joined up with the rebel forces because she's trying to stop her evil cousin, but she's also lost all of the status that she had, all of the work accomplishments, all of the prestige that she ever had. He has taken away from her. And so all of those things that Katniss said about bitterness, hatred, all of that is true, but it's just so much deeper than Katniss can even fathom at this point in the story. So yeah, that was just a very interesting bit, and we have 60 pages left. Well, I don't think there's going to be much more that I'm going to check in on while I'm reading, but I will check in afterwards if I don't have anything else to say. But in any case, let's go ahead and finish this book. Alrighty, friends. I just finished Mockingjay. I did cry once again. I teared up a little bit for Finnick, and then I cried for Prim, which honestly, I was fully expecting, so not very surprising. They made me cry the first time. Figured it'd happen again. So now it is about 9 o'clock, so it's gonna be another late night, but I don't have many thoughts, I guess, after finishing Mockingjay. I remembered more from the second half of the book than I did from the first half of the book. And maybe that's just because more of like the action-y stuff happens in the second half of the book. Although there was some action in the first half. I don't know. I feel like because I remembered this book a bit more, I wasn't super surprised about it. Now the true test is going to be watching the movie. and seeing what differences I see, because even though I have seen this movie, it was not fresh in my mind the first time that I saw it. So there's a possibility that it's going to be like Mockingjay Part 1 and there's going to be a lot of stuff that I have to say. But we will save those thoughts for in the morning. I will go ahead and lead off with one thought that I had pretty much immediately when I started reading, because when I started on chapter 14, one of the first things that they talked about was how easy the extraction of Peeta and Joanna was. Like, it was almost too easy. Like they were willingly giving up Peeta and Joanna. Because Peeta has been trained to kill Katniss, so Snow willingly, like, turned a blind eye when they were doing their little rescue mission. And so that was why they were able to get in and out so easily. So yeah, I thought that was funny that was one of the big talking points that I had about how that whole dramatic extraction scene with the conversation between Katniss and Snow, all of that didn't happen in the book. It just drove the point home when I picked up the book again today, and that was like the first thing that I was reading about was Boggs talking about how easy it was. So just thought I'd put that in there. But yes, I'm sure I will have plenty of thoughts for you in the morning. So let's keep this pre-movie check-in brief and just go ahead and get into the watch portion, because I don't want to talk too much in this video, just in case I have a lot to say afterwards. So let's go ahead and get started with the movie. Alrighty, friends, it is the next morning and it is time to go over the thoughts that I had while watching Mockingjay Part 2. Now, I don't have as many notes for this movie as I did for Part 1. Mostly because I feel like Part 1 really set my expectations for Part 2, and I also remembered more of the visual interpretations of certain scenes in Part 2 than I did in Part 1. So just with that alone, I had a bit more background knowledge of this movie going in than I did with Mockingjay Part 1. So overall, I think this video should be a fair bit shorter than the last video was. But that being said, I do still have a decent size list of notes. It's not nearly as long as the last one was, but at this point I had accepted some of the changes that they made were going to stick around from Mockingjay Part 1 through the rest of the series. So I didn't take notes on like every single difference or change that I saw. But yeah, let's just go ahead and get into it and talk about my thoughts about Mockingjay Part 2 after finishing the book. Just like in Mockingjay Part 1, they did mix up the chronological events of the stuff that happens in the story when they adapted it to the movie. And it just kind of threw me off in my following along of the story. And so Mockingjay Part 2 opens with the scene where they're trying to send someone in to talk to Peeta that's not Katniss. And they're trying to see how deep this tracker-jacker hijacking goes. And in the movie, it's Prim that goes in and talks to, I almost said Harry. What? There is no one in this series named Harry. The person that plays Peeta isn't even named Harry. Why did I just think of Harry? In any case, Prim goes in and she's trying to talk to Peeta. And obviously it devolves into him like yelling at her not to trust Katniss, that Katniss is a capital mutt, that she's working for the Capitol and she's going to get them all killed. And that is what happens in general in the book, but it's not Prim that they send in to talk to him. In the book, they send in a childhood friend whose name is Deli. And like, Deli's not a huge character or anything like that, but she is present throughout the book. Like, she's referenced several times. There's a part in the very first book where Katniss recognizes one of the Avoxes that is serving them in their room in the training center. And she recognizes her because she ran into her in the woods years ago while she was trying to run away. She literally saw her being picked up by a Capitol hovercraft and puts together that she was turned into an Avox for trying to defect from Pan Am, essentially. And so when Katniss acts like she recognizes the Avox, in order not to give herself away, Peeta covers for her and says like, oh yeah, she kind of looks like Deli from back home. And so Deli is a person that both Peeta and Katniss know, but Deli is not necessarily Katniss's friend. Like, they know of each other, but Deli is more Peeta's friend than she is Katniss's friend. In the book, it talks about how Deli and Peeta were essentially raised together. Like, they played together as children. she is probably one of the oldest friends that Peeta has. And that friendship extends long before he met Katniss, which is important because the whole reason that they send Deli in to talk to Peeta in this scene is because they are trying to send someone in that will not remind him of Katniss. Because after his outburst where he tries to kill Katniss, they figure out that anything related to Katniss will set him in a murderous rampage. It's almost like he's like a sleeper agent. Like, if you've ever seen the movie Zoolander, it's kind of like the end scene where, you know, they play, I think it's Relax, and they play that song, and then Derek Zoolander turns into an assassin. And he's trying to assassinate this political leader. It's kind of like that. Like, anytime he hears something associated with Katniss or he sees Katniss, he just goes wild and he starts ranting and raving about how she can't be trusted and she needs to be killed. That's why I don't really like that they changed it, because there was a reason why they sent Deli in specifically in that scene. And by sending Prim in the movie instead of Deli, it completely defeats the purpose that they had for sending Deli in the first place. I just don't think it really needed to be changed like that, because it would have been so easy to just work Deli in for that one scene. They literally could have just sent Deli in, and then someone like Haymitch asks Katniss, like, who's this girl? And she just says, oh, that's Deli, that's Peeta's childhood friend. And just like briefly explained why they sent Deli in. And I just really don't like that change, because not only did it not really need to happen, but it also completely goes against the reasoning in the book for why Deli is the one that they choose to go talk to Peeta. So that was like right off the bat, opening scene, a thing that bothered me. So we're starting off strong. So like I said, because of the switching around of events that happen in the book and the pacing of the movie in general, it kind of felt a little disorienting to me as someone who read the book, trying to watch the movie and piece together what scene that they're portraying in that moment. I didn't write down any specific examples, because while I was watching and trying to figure out what exactly was going on in the movie, it got me starting to think that I'm misremembering the order of events in general in the book. So I don't really know what exactly is out of order. I just know that the vibe of the overall movie is a lot different from the book, pacing wise. And for me, at least, it felt like the beginning part of the movie, they like rushed through events. And then for the second half of the movie, they really stretched out other events. Like all of the traipsing around the Capitol, all of the bombings in the Capitol, sneaking through the tunnels, all of that stuff. Not that it felt too long, just compared to all of the other things that happen in the first part of the movie and how quickly those scenes are kind of rushed through to get to the Capitol scenes, it just made the pacing feel weird to me. If you've just seen the movies, it probably wouldn't bother you because that's your only reference for the course of events. But as someone who read Mockingjay Part 1 and 2, it was a little bit disorienting pace-wise to keep up with, at least in my opinion. Maybe I'm alone in that, maybe that's just me, but I just think that the pacing was a little weird in both of these movies compared to the first and second ones. So this next point is something that happens or rather doesn't happen, in Mockingjay Part 1 and 2. That is Haymitch's fight to try to get Katniss to wear her frickin' headset. Anytime Katniss is on the ground and in combat zones, she is supposed to be wearing an earpiece, which Haymitch can talk to her from a hovercraft that is above them and, you know, surveying the area, keeping watch, that kind of thing. And in Mockingjay Part 1, when they're in District 8 and the bombing of the hospital happens and Katniss goes and starts shooting down hovercrafts, that scene, up until she runs away and starts trying to gun down the hovercrafts, Haymitch is in her ear trying to tell her how to get to the bunker. He's essentially giving her orders, like a commander would, to, you know, get to shelter, get to safety, because she's the face of the revolution. And she disobeys those orders directly, rips her earpiece out, and that's when she goes up to the machine gun nest and starts shooting at the hovercraft. After all of that, Katniss and Haymitch meet back up. Haymitch tells her that she needs to keep her earpiece in and she needs to listen to him. And in order to drive that point home, that she needs to keep her earpiece in, he says that if she rips it out again, he's going to have her fitted with a head brace that locks onto her head and will keep the earpiece in her ear, and Haymitch will have the only key. And then if that doesn't work, he will have a surgeon implant a speaker into her ear so that he can talk to her whenever he wants, 24 hours a day. And in the second half of the book, when she inevitably rips her earpiece out again, he once again starts talking about, you know, I guess I gotta get that head brace fitted because you won't keep your earpiece in. And they like completely take out Haymitch's whole role in continuing to be Katniss's mentor throughout this revolution. It's really an extension of him mentoring her outside of the official Hunger Games and into this world of revolution. I just don't like that they took those parts out, and I really don't like how much of Haymitch's role in the revolution got taken out of both movies. Because, once again, they really make it seem like it is President Coin and Plutarch Heavensbee that are running the show, and they're doing it by themselves. And there is not like a command center that has all of these different people giving ideas and weighing in on options and things like that. So not only does that take away a lot of Haymitch's role throughout the entire revolution, but like I talked about before, it dampens Finnick's role, it dampens Boggs' role, it dampens the entire command center, because it really is a collective group that is in the command center, watching all of the Capitol broadcast and watching Beatty really dig in and burrow into the Capitol network so that he can play their propos for everyone. And I understand that they're kind of trying to make it more obvious that Coin may not be the hero that you think she is throughout the movie, but I just don't like that they took away that team aspect of the revolution. I think that's a very important aspect of this revolution, and it's also something that makes Coin even more sinister, because in having that team collaboration, she makes everyone involved believe that she is really open to hearing their opinions and open to democracy. And as the book goes on, you slowly start to realize that by the things that she says, that she's just as bad, if not worse, than President Snow, because she is able to get people to believe that she has their best interest at heart. And outside of the Capitol, there's not really many people that believe President Snow has their best interest at heart. That's why it's so militarized, and they have to beat people into suppression, starve them, all of that stuff. It wasn't like everyone in the districts just woke up one day after the Quarter Quell and decided that, you know what, I don't think President Snow really cares about us like he says he does. There has been civil unrest for years, and all of these embers of revolution smoldering, and Katniss is really just the gust of wind that sets it all alight. I don't think the movies do the best job really conveying that really subtle evil that Coin has to her. Katniss is able to see it because she has looked so much evil in the face, and she can see right through what Coin is doing. But a lot of other people around them don't really see it like that. This is just a random comment, but really watching from Catching Fire to Mockingjay Part 2, the casting for Joanna Mason is chef's kiss. It's so good. The actress that plays her did a phenomenal job. She was exactly how I pictured her in my head when I was reading the book, and her line delivery was so good. She got the sassiness, she got the sarcasm right, and it was just a really good portrayal of that character, and I really enjoyed her as Joanna Mason. And because of how good her portrayal was, it kind of made me wish that Joanna was just around more throughout this series. One of the bigger things that they changed in this, and one of the things that confused me while I was watching it too, was that they make it seem like Katniss is defecting from the Capitol to go be with Gale and fight with the soldiers in District 2. And when it happens in the movie, they literally make it seem like she is deserting. Like, Coin has no idea what's going on. They see her, like, running towards whatever supply plane is heading towards 2, hop on, and then she's off and into District 2. And the thing that confuses me about that is that everyone else is just cool with it. Like, once she gets there, Boggs is there, and he's like, oh, cool, you're here. Squad 451, let's go. And it's just confusing because Coin kind of seems mad at first and then like kind of backtracks, and I guess that's when she decides to send Peeta in with them to District 2 in the Capitol. But I was just very confused by the whole thing because in the book, what happens is, like I've said before, everyone in District 13 is military trained. And so they have this assessment where they go into an assessment with judges, kind of like they do with the game makers before the games, where they show off their talents and they get placed into a military squad. And like I said in my previous video, this is not optional. This is something that pretty much everyone in 13 over a certain age has to do. They get assigned to their squad and they're part of the military. It's like required. And they've had all of these training sessions to, you know, work with guns, get good with using military weapons instead of like bows and arrows and axes and tridents, all of that stuff. And Katniss talks about how, you know, it takes her a little bit to get used to the controls of the gun, but once she gets used to it, she's able to be pretty much just as accurate as she is with a bow. And so she goes into her assessment. She does great, like we expect, because she's our heroine, she's our Mockingjay, she's our sharpshooter, all of that. And so because she is such a good shot, she gets put with a special ops sharpshooters unit. That is a bit of a tongue twister. So she gets put with this sharpshooter unit, which is Squad 451. So it's not like it is in the movie where, you know, Finnick just shows up and joins the fray, and, you know, Gale's there, and Katniss just shows up and she's welcomed with open arms. That's not how it goes in the book. The people that are on Squad 451 are all insanely good shots. It's essentially like a sniper unit. These are people, as Katniss describes in Mockingjay, that could shoot the dust off your boots from 50 yards away. That's how good a shot these people are. And every single person on that sharpshooter squad is that good. So these are like their best. So Katniss doesn't just stumble her way onto this squad because she ran away from District 13. She is strategically placed there for a reason. So that whole part, the way that they changed it and like made it seem like Coin was against Katniss going to District 2, all of that just confused me in the movie because it's nothing like what happens in the book. And I just still don't understand why they took out so much of the training that Katniss goes through in 13, because if anything, it just makes it more interesting. Because in the movie, it really makes it seem like, you know, these are just people with chips on their shoulders that are going after the Capitol because they have a personal vendetta. And that may be part of a motivation for a lot of them, but they are also highly trained. They have gotten so much training in District 13 that now, not only are they dangerous because they're angry with President Snow, but they're now militarily trained to assassinate him. And I just don't understand why those changes were made. They didn't really need to be made like that. But nonetheless, that was a difference that I noticed and I wasn't happy about. Editing Kristen here. If you hear snoring nearby, there is a dog sleeping to my left, so please ignore that. But I just wanted to pop on here because as I was editing, I thought of another thing that I forgot to mention, and that is there is a part in the assessments that they have for the different military squads in District 13 when Katniss gets assigned to Squad 451. Part of her assessment is that they are simulating warfare and they are testing their weaknesses. Katniss's weakness is that she cannot take orders. So one of the things that they do is they give her direct orders to do one thing and then they put something in front of her that they know will tempt her to disobey orders. I believe what happens is there's like a group of peacekeepers or something that is coming towards them, and her instinct is to start shooting. Obviously, that's what Katniss does. She shoots things. So her instinct is to immediately start shooting them. And in her ear, she hears her commander yell at her to get down. And she has a realization that that is what her weakness is. Her weakness is that she does not take orders, and she routinely ignores orders. Just like I said earlier in the part where she's ripping her earpiece out because she does not want to listen to what Haymitch is telling her to do, she realizes that that is her biggest weakness militarily. And she adapts. She listens to the command, she gets down, and then there are projectiles, missiles, something happens, and when she hits the ground, all of the peacekeepers are taken out. So they do this for everyone that comes through this skill assessment to place them into different squads. And they talk specifically about how Peeta was able to get through it, Finnick was able to get through it, but the one person that was not able to get through it was Joanna. And the reason why is because in the Capitol, they used water torture on her. So when Joanna goes into her military assessment, they know that her biggest weakness is now water because she was tortured with it, and she is now basically hydrophobic, if that's the right term. She's afraid of water. And in the little makeshift street area that they make for this assessment, they flood it with water, and she has a mental breakdown and she is sent back to the hospital. That is why Joanna is not in the fighting in the second half of Mockingjay Part 2, because she failed her assessment, and she, for the rest of the movie, until they get to the voting on how to deal with President Snow and if they should have another Hunger Games, that's why she's not there. She is in the hospital because she has had a mental relapse. And so that was something that I just thought of while I was editing this, and I just wanted to include that because they don't say that in the movie. They just have Joanna not be in like half of the movie, and they don't give you a reason for it. So that's the reason why she's not there. Just thought I'd share in case anyone was curious. Okay, I now have a companion. But one more thing I wanted to say about Joanna, just because I really like Joanna as a character. They do include the part in Catching Fire with the Tracker Jackers where Joanna tells Katniss that, you know, Snow can't hurt her with the Tracker Jackers or anything like that anymore because there's no one left that she loves that he can use against her. Katniss notices when they're in District 13 that Joanna doesn't have a single thing from home. She doesn't have any pictures of family, no pictures of friends. We know that she doesn't really have anyone back home. When Joanna finally gets released from the hospital, they allow her to be moved into a compartment under the condition that she lives with someone, and Katniss volunteers to be her roommate. And when Joanna moves in, Katniss notices that she literally doesn't have anything that is unique to her. She only has, you know, the standard issue clothes that they give you in 13. She has just common things that everyone has. There's nothing in her possession that is personal to her specifically. She doesn't have anything from home, no photos, nothing like that. And so what Katniss does is Katniss goes out into the woods in 13 and she gathers pine needles and puts them in a piece of fabric. I believe she like bundles them up in gauze and she gives them to Joanna because Joanna's from District 7 and that's where all of the lumber is produced. That's why she was dressed as a tree in Catching Fire. And so Katniss brings her this bundle of pine needles and she gives it to Joanna. Joanna brings it up to her nose and takes a deep breath. And the only thing she says is, "It smells like home." And it's just such a sweet moment. And it's a real turning point in their relationship. And that's just yet another thing that they cut out and took away from one of the characters in this series. We see more of Joanna in general in Mockingjay than you see in the book. You know, her and Katniss share a hospital room for a period of time. They become roommates and they start living together. They start training together, all of that stuff. And it's all just cut out of the movie. And I think it's just such a tragedy because they got the casting so good for Joanna Mason, but then they take away scenes like that from her that really show her more human side and that she's not as tough as she acts on the outside. And she's kind of like Haymitch, where she sees it as a strength to not have anyone that she is close to because the people that she cares about can be used as leverage against her by the Capitol. It's so sad for her, and then for Katniss to do whatever she can to try to give Joanna some semblance of home, and Joanna is so receptive of it and she's very appreciative of it. It's just really sad that they cut that out of the movie, but then they kept the part where, you know, she's snarky and talking about how, you know, she hates Katniss because everyone loves her, and, you know, she has this whole heroine air about her and save the defenseless, all of that. And what's even more annoying about it is that it's not an act and it's all real and that's how she really is. And they kept all of that, but then they don't show her softer side too. They really make her into a more one-dimensional character than she ever is in the book. And the book is why I love Joanna Mason so much, because you get so much more of her character in the book, but they cut it out of the movie, sadly. So I just wanted to mention the pine needle thing because it's just a very touching scene, and I love that scene so much, and I hate that I got cut from the movie. So the scene where Boggs ends up stepping on a landmine and he blows his legs off and ends up passing away, he dies so much faster in the movie than he does in the book. In the book, when that big black wave comes crashing down, they are literally dragging Boggs's body through the street while he's alive, screaming in agony to get him into that house that they end up taking refuge in. And he ends up dying in the kitchen in that house. So he is alive for much longer. He's able to tell Katniss a little bit more than just his cryptic, you know, don't trust them, kill Peeta if you have to. He's able to communicate with her a bit more before he ultimately passes away and they have to leave him there. And not that that's like a big, you know, plot change that affects the rest of the book/movie, but the imagery of all of that happening in the book is so much more intense. And I think that's because it's slower paced. Like, it does get adrenaline pumping when the black wave starts coming and they have to get Boggs out of there. But Katniss is trying desperately to save Boggs. They all try to save him. They break out tourniquets and they try to stop the bleeding from his legs before they ultimately realize that he's not gonna make it because he's losing far too much blood. So it's just a scene where in the movie, it doesn't seem like they try to save him at all, but in the book, they try so hard to save their commanding officer. And I just think that that's just kind of sad that they took that ending away from Boggs and they just, in the movie, end up leaving him in the street. And it just kind of sucks that in the movie, he gets such an abrupt ending that's then immediately glossed over, quite literally, with the black wave that comes right after. And I just think that Boggs deserves more than that. He does have a lot less character development in the movie, but even taking that away from him, I just think is a tragedy, in my opinion, because I personally really like Boggs. I think he's funny. He makes jokes in the book, and he's kind of buddy-buddy with Katniss. And so I like Boggs a lot, and I just wanted him to have a bit more meaningful and impactful a death than he got in the movie. In the movie, they showed the underground tunnels being actively used. Like, there are carts going through them and stuff, and I don't know if in the movie it's like automatic and there aren't any people in the carts or whatever, but in the book, the tunnels underneath the Capitol are completely not in operation when they are trudging through them, which is why it's so disconcerting when Katniss starts hearing the hissing from the Mutts and they're saying her name, because there's not supposed to be anything else down there with them. And in the movie, they show carts and stuff going through the tunnels, like they have to hide around corners so that the people in the carts don't see them. But if you think about it, they are underneath the city in the middle of a mass evacuation. There shouldn't be any supply carts or whatever they are going through the tunnels like that, because everyone is supposed to be moving to the mansion. They're supposed to be moving towards the city center where President Snow will save them. So that was a part that I get that it makes it a bit more adrenaline inducing, but if you sit there and think about it, it doesn't make sense and it didn't happen in the book like that. So that was just another thing that I saw and I was like, what the heck? So the fight scene with the Capitol Mutts in the underground tunnels when Finnick ends up being overwhelmed by them is a lot longer and more dramatic in the movie than it is in the book. But I do understand why they did that. You know, Finnick is a fan favorite. He's my favorite. And his death is just so emotional and it's so tragic that I understand why they did it that way, and it did make me cry, I'm not gonna lie. I cried a lot at Finnick's death. I was so sad. Even though I knew exactly how it happened, I've read the book twice, I've seen the movie twice at this point, I knew exactly what was gonna happen. It still made me cry because I love Finnick so much. His death is one of those scenes in a movie where every time I watch it and I know it's coming, there's a small part of me that hopes that maybe this time it'll be a little different and he will survive. But obviously it's never gonna happen because that's not how his story plays out, even though I really wish that it would go a different way and he could be with Annie and their little boy. But alas, Finnick lives in my heart rent-free. But yeah, so that scene was particularly emotional for me. So after the Capitol bombings, when Prim loses her life, as it does show in the movie, Katniss is almost killed by the explosion as well. She is thrown back by the explosion and gets scorched all over her body. She has to get all these skin grafts to grow new skin because a lot of it was quite literally burned off by the bombs that were dropped on the Capitol. And she goes through quite a bit of recovery because she has to regrow so much skin. And they just kind of glaze past that. They didn't really show her recovering at all. She just kind of wakes up and then they move on to the next scene. Katniss in the movie is a lot more cold towards Gale than she was in the book. So when Katniss confronts Gale and asks him if the two-tiered bombs, where they drop the first set of bombs and then once all the medics rush in, they drop a second set of bombs, was his plan that he gave to the rebels. And he answers honestly and he says, I don't know. Beetee doesn't know. I don't know. But the readers and Katniss both know that that was Gale's plan that he gave to Beetee, and that it more than likely was the rebels that did both of the bombings. In the movie, Katniss is so much more cold towards Gale. Like, yes, he did provide the idea of doing something like that, but he in no way expected them to use it on rebel medics themselves. He even says himself, like, my only job was to take care of your family and I failed. And he's like very emotional about it. He loved Prim too. It's not like she was like, it's okay, Gale, like, I forgive you. She wasn't like that in the book at all. But in the movie, she just says goodbye, Gale, and then he just leaves. And we're led to believe that they never really speak again after that. And in the book, yes, Gale goes off and does his own thing after the end of the war and all of that stuff. But the book made it seem like that was more his career choice. Like, he stays back into, he works with the military, all of that stuff. But it's not really because Katniss pushes him out of her life. At least they don't make it seem like that in the book. It seems more like Gale retreats completely from Katniss because he sees that as the final nail in the coffin for their relationship. Because there's no way that they can have a future together when he is tied to Prim's death so directly. And I thought it was interesting that in the movie, they made it to where Katniss was so cold towards him. When Katniss gets to execute Snow and she walks out in front of the big crowd and Snow is right in front of her, Coin is above on a balcony talking to Panam as the interim president, she does not say in the book, let your aim be true as your heart is pure. She doesn't say that at all. She gives like a little speech, but she doesn't say that part. And it's just, I don't know, it just kind of made me cringe a little bit in the movie because it's a little on the nose for what happens next when Katniss ends up shooting Coin. It's just it's a little too on the nose for me. I heard that line and I kind of like rolled my eyes. I was kind of like, okay, Alma, whatever. And yeah, so I didn't particularly like that choice of line, but it doesn't really affect anything else other than it's just some intense foreshadowing. Because in the scene pretty much immediately before is when Coin suggests having another Hunger Games with capital children only. And that's when Katniss really realizes that she is just as bad, if not worse, than President Snow. And sees that she's gonna be a terrible leader as well, and she needs to be stopped before she can even do anything in power. She was president for like less than a day, maybe like 8 hours. I also think it's interesting that in the book and the movie, they make it a point to tell you that that President Snow is coughing up blood, which I don't know if it's meant to be a sign of tuberculosis, but clearly he is sick. He's unwell and he is probably dying. And so I think that also had a hand in it too, because Katniss sees that, you know, President Snow's on the verge of death anyway, and we have this new president that is alive and well and is showing signs that she is going to be an evil leader. So Katniss instead takes her out and then leaves Snow to the crowd. And it's kind of disputed of what actually happens to Snow. Some people think that he like choked on his own blood while he was coughing and laughing. And then other people think that he was trampled by the crowd. Either way, President Snow doesn't make it out of that assassination arena alive. Plutarch doesn't send Katniss a letter telling her all of the things that happened once she left the capital. In the book, what happens after the execution is that Katniss is detained immediately, and she is put into her old room in the training center and essentially just locked in there. They give her clothes to wear, they give her food, all of that stuff, and she has like her attached bathroom, but she is quarantined and stuck in her old room. And then once Haymitch comes to get her, he fills her in on all of the things that have happened since she's been locked in her room. And the things that happen are she is put on trial, fully put on trial for killing President Coin. And then people from the rebellion and stuff come and speak on her behalf, and she ends up getting acquitted. So she does not serve any prison time or anything like that for killing President Coin. But in the book, they're saying like, whoever becomes the new president, they will pardon you. We're gonna have a fair election, all of that stuff. And I don't know, it just was a little weird, because I thought that, you know, locking her in a room while a trial was going on and then just filling her in on everything that happens after the trial is done was an effective way to do it in the first place. I don't know if they wanted to have all of those things told to her through a letter from Plutarch as a kind of send-off for Philip Seymour Hoffman as well, who played Plutarch Heavensbee and passed away before Mockingjay Part 2 came out. I don't know if they did that to kind of like get a goodbye from him as well in the movie, but it just was a little weird to me as someone who read the book. In the book, when Katniss goes back to District 12 with Haymitch, Greasy Say and her granddaughter, they come to Katniss's house and they cook for her 2 meals a day and just talk to her. And they took that away in the movie, and Katniss is just by herself the entire time while she's in District 12, basically until Peeta shows up with primroses and plants them in her front yard. And not that that really does anything for the plot, but I just thought it was interesting that, you know, they showed Greasy Say once in like the very first movie, and then as far as the movies are concerned, she doesn't exist after that. Another thing that happens in the book, when Katniss goes hunting, she sees people, you know, clearing out the rubble from the fire bombings in District 12. They're recovering bodies, burying them in the meadow that Katniss enjoys so much. And it just kind of shows how the evil of the Capitol and President Snow has tainted everything good in Katniss's life. I've talked extensively about the lake that she holds dear and how that is more than likely the same lake that Coriolanus and Lucy Gray Baird go to, but also now the meadow that she hunted with Gale in and hunted with her father in is now a mass grave for all of the people in 12 that could not escape the fire bombings. And I just think that that's just such good symbolism for how far-reaching President Snow's evil is, and it has touched every part of Katniss's life. Also, while she's out walking around, she sees people clearing the rubble from the mayor's house, and she asks about Madge and her family, and they tell her that no one in that family made it out of that house alive. And so now not only have we missed out on Madge in all of the movies, but we don't even get to know what her ending was. And that's how it ended for her. She was stuck in her house and when the fire bombings happened. And Katniss is very upset by that, because she even says, like, I would think that the mayor would be one of the first people to get out. The worker basically tells her, like, that titles don't really mean much when you're being firebombed. And it's a very sad moment in the story, and it just makes me even more sad that Madge was just straight up not included at all in any of the movies. And then the last thing that I wanted to say was that there's not really any explanation of Coin herself and like what her lore is. I read so many fan theories about her when I first finished Mockingjay about why she is the way she is, why she's so evil. And the most interesting one to me is that she is actually President Snow's daughter, and that she changed her name to Alma Coin when she moved to 13, and that taking over power from her father has been her goal all along. And this has been a big long con to get into power Snow style, because, you know, as we know, President Snow himself, very manipulative, very cunning, and a planner. He is always 3 steps ahead everyone else, and he is smart and calculating. If he was in Harry Potter, he would be a Slytherin, 1000%. And what I think is so interesting about that theory is that there are a lot of similarities between Coin and President Snow, personality-wise. And I think the biggest difference between them is that Alma Coin is just better at masking. She's better at covering up her evil than President Snow is. President Snow is a very quiet and menacing kind of evil, but you can still tell that he's evil. However, President Coin is evil, but in a far more discreet way. It's so discreet that you can almost miss it. if you're not paying attention. And I think that's something that I noticed on my second read through, knowing that Coin is evil. Because when you have that knowledge that a character is evil from the jump, you can see those little comments that they make that kind of give them away a little bit. And there are a lot of comments that Coin makes that just show how disconnected she is from the people around her, and how she doesn't really have much empathy. Every move that she makes, if it's helping someone, it's also helping her. She's very strategic in the things that she does and how she goes about doing them. And she's very intentional on the words that she uses, what she gives up, and how she presents herself. And it's just so interesting because it's almost like she has all the traits of her father, but she's been watching him and she's learned from his mistakes and has learned how to be evil and get what she wants while letting people believe that she is good. And that's just so interesting to me. I find her such a fascinating character, and I would love to know more about her beyond what we know in Mockingjay. So yeah, that's pretty much all my thoughts on Mockingjay Part 2. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully it's not over an hour long like the last one was, but even if it is a long one, hopefully it was at least entertaining. If you did like this video, go ahead and leave a like down below and let me know. You should also subscribe while you're down there because I put out new videos every weekend. And yeah, I hope you guys are having a wonderful day wherever you are in the world, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!